held at Sidley Austin in DC. So I will let them get started. The format will be Brian will talk for a while, Tom will talk for a while, they'll do it again, and then I will carry the microphone through the crowd so that you can ask your questions. So with that, Brian.
Thank you. You can applaud me as often as you want. No, but thank you all for coming out tonight. I was worried with the weather we wouldn't have many people here tonight, but it just goes to show that you are much hardier than people in Tennessee are. And so, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate Tom being here, lending his time to the Federalist Society to discuss these important issues tonight. I do want to start by saying that I come here in peace. It is not my job or mission to remake your judiciary in the image of my old boss, Justice Scalia. I personally am a supporter of gay marriage. So I'm not here because I'm mad at your Supreme Court for creating a right to gay marriage. I personally am very pro-plaintiff. I have a book coming out in October called The Conservative Case for Class Action Lawsuits. So I'm not here because I think your court is too pro-plaintiff. I'm here because I think that there's a legitimate question to be asked about why lawyers get more say on 1/3 of the government of Iowa than the rest of the people of Iowa. I think that is a legitimate question to ask, irrespective of how the Iowa Supreme Court has or has not decided your favorite cases. The other thing I want to say at the outset is I understand, I don't want to prejudge what Tom has to say, but I understand why the bar likes the current system. The current system gives lawyers a lot of power. Almost half of the commission that decides who the governor can put on your courts is selected by the legal profession and no one else. That is a lot of power over one full branch of government. People like power. You don't have to be greedy. You're just a regular person. If someone gives you a lot of power and then they say they're going to take it away, I understand why you would not like that. So I don't begrudge the legal profession for wanting to keep the power that they have under the current system. I'm just asking here tonight, can that power be defended intellectually? And I don't think it can. The three things that I hear from proponents of giving lawyers outsized influence over judicial selection are these three things. Number one, lawyers know better than the rest of us about what makes a good judge. Therefore, giving lawyers more power will produce better judges. That's one thing I hear a lot. I don't think that's true, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. Number two, I often hear that if we use these commissions with lots of lawyers, we will end up with judges that reflect racial and gender diversity better than if we rely on other systems. I don't think that's true either, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And then lastly, people who support these commissions that are dominated by lawyers, they say we need to keep the lawyers dominating the commissions because lawyers are apolitical. If we have other people, say the governor or legislators, choosing the members of these commissions, it will become political and that'll be bad. I don't think that's true either. So I'm going to go through each of those three things. Number one, do lawyer commissions pick better judges than other people who pick judges do? The answer to this is no. Political scientists and law professors have been studying this very question for 50 years. There is now probably 12 different empirical studies that attempt to assess whether the quality of judges in one selection system is better than the quality of judges in a different selection system. Now, all of these studies have to look at proxies for quality because it's very hard to define what is a good judge. But here are the proxies that we have looked at. Number one, how many years of experience does the lawyer have when they become a judge? Does the person picked for this judicial appointment have any prior judicial experience? How good is the law school that the person went to? How productive is the person once they get on the bench? Do they write a lot of opinions, or do they not write very many opinions? Well, the judges wanted to cite their opinions. We have looked at all these proxies for quality over and over and over again, and the answer that comes back is there is no difference between merit commission selected judges and judges that are politically appointed and judges that are elected by the population. We can find no statistical significant difference between any of these systems. So, I'm sorry to say to the lawyers, and I must tell you, this surprises me. As a lawyer, I assumed that I would pick better judges than other people would pick, but the data does not bear this out. And I think one reason why the data does not bear this out is because no matter what system you use, lawyers are going to be involved in the vetting of judicial nominees. The question you have to ask yourself here in Iowa is, do you want to give lawyers a veto over who the judicial nominees are? But lawyers will always be involved. When the President of the United States picks his judicial nominees, he has a whole team of lawyers vetting them. When the United States senators decide whether to vote to confirm those people, they have a whole team of lawyers helping them. The American Bar Association does a report on every single person the President nominates, investigating their background, interviewing their clients, interviewing their opposing counsel, and they rate these people. So lawyers are involved every time we select someone. The question is, how involved should they be? Should they give us their opinion, or should we give them a veto power? But on the first claim by proponents, I don't think there's any evidence that putting a bunch of lawyers on these commissions produces better judges. Second, what about diversity? This issue, too, has been studied by empiricists for many decades. And there is no evidence that merit commissions produce more or less racial diversity or gender diversity than the other systems. There are some studies that have suggested yes. There are some studies that have suggested no. There's no consistent answer that one system is better than another. So if the reason you want your merit commission here to keep all these lawyers on it is because you think we're going to have more women on the Iowa Supreme Court or more racial minorities on the Iowa Supreme Court, I just don't think there's any reason in the data to be confident that that is in fact what is going to happen by keeping lawyers on these commissions. Let me turn to the third reason proponents give, and that is lawyers are not political. I really find this an amusing claim because I guess because I know so many lawyers. And the lawyers that I know are not apolitical. When Herbert Kritzer, who's a very famous political scientist at the University of Wisconsin, when he looked into merit systems and he interviewed the various players in these systems over many years, he came to the following conclusion. The lawyers on these commissions are not apolitical, he said. They are just differently political. Of course the lawyers have political views. Of course lawyers want their political views written into the law. Of course lawyers are going to care about whether the judges they pick are going to embrace their views once they get on the bench. Lawyers are just like the rest of us in all of those ways. They're not superhuman. They, of course, are curious about how the judges they might pick might decide important cases. But lawyers are differently political, as Professor Kritzer said. What does that mean? Well, lawyers have political views, but they have very different political views than the rest of the public. Adam Bonica and Maya Sin. They took the Martindale-Hubbell database, directory of lawyers in the United States, and they mashed it up against a database of campaign contributions that people made in 2012. They mashed the two things up, matched all the names, and they showed the political leanings of lawyers in the United States of America. They've done it for every state. They've done it for every law school. You can go look up your state and your law school in their paper. But if you look at the political leanings of lawyers, they are far to the left of the general public. Lawyers are more liberal than the rest of us. So, when you put lawyers in a place of privilege to select important public officials, you may very well end up with public officials that are much to the left of the public as well. Lawyers, again, cannot help but want to see their own views reflected in our society and in our laws. We don't really have to speculate about this. I have spent several years doing a state in the United States. Between 1990 and 2010, 3,000 people served as appellate judges in the United States in state courts during those years. I looked up the campaign contributions of every one of those appellate judges, and I compared what were the political leanings of the appellate judges in each state. I compared it to the political leanings of the people in each state. Were the judges reflective of the people's views, or were the judges to the left or to the right of the people's views? And what I found was, in states like yours that use merit commissions with spots reserved for lawyer-selected commissioners, the judges are much to the left of the people who live in their states. And I have to tell you, I'm sorry to tell you, Iowa was the second worst offender of any of the 50 states in this country. Your judges are further out of step to the left from your public than all but one state in the United States of America, at least between 1990 and 2010. And I am not an expert in the jurisprudence of your courts here, but since I've been here, I've heard a lot of people tell me about various decisions of the Iowa Supreme Court that they think is consistent with what I have said, a court that is far to the left of the public here. Now, I want to go back to something I said at the beginning. I am not here to cast judgment on whether it is good or bad to be a liberal court or a conservative court. I'm simply asking, why should the court be so far out of step with the public? And why should lawyers get their political views reflected on the court instead of everyone else's? If they're not picking better judges, if they're not picking more diverse judges, why do their political views get special prominence on your courts instead of everyone else's? I don't have a good answer to that question, but I hope Tom does. Thank you very much.